Okay. I may be the oldest of the Chin kids, but I'm the shortest. Okay. So here are some more of Auntie May's thoughts. A lot of this has to do with the time that she and her family were in China. In June of 1944, dear Dorothy made me very happy when she went to Washington, D.C. with Father and Mother to be my bridesmaid at my wedding to Harry. She was beautiful in a light blue gown and wearing some flowers in her hair. Our sister-in-law, Yolande, played the bridal march as I walked down the aisle. During the 40 years when I lived in China, I missed out on the life of my parents and siblings in the States. Luckily, the few letters we were able to write each other in the 1960s and 70s, and the special but rare visits from my sisters and their husbands, and some of my nieces and nephews in the 1980s kept us close. In 1974, when Kim visited China, Dor had her take me a maroon-colored sweater and a beanie hat that she had knitted, and some pretty cotton fabric. I was very pleased to get the material because cloth was rationed in China at that time. When Dor and Tom visited me in China in 1979, I wore 2 shirts that I had made with the cloth. I still have the sweater and hat even now, almost 40 years later. In 1979, Dor and Tom went to China for the first time in their lives. I was on my return trip to China after a year's visit in the States, so Dor, Tom, and I flew together on the same flight. We went to Guangzhou to visit our family village. We visited with cousin Nam's 90-year-old mother, his sister, and her son. And Nam is Shirley's father, and Shirley is here with us today. From Guangzhou, we flew to Chongqing, where we were met by my husband, Harry, at the airport. Then we rode in our school bus for almost 2 hours before we arrived at our home on the college campus in Beibei. Tom and Dor were very interested to see where we taught English to teachers. On Dor and Tom's subsequent visits to China, I joined them to see sites like Beijing and Xi'an. On one visit, Harry and our daughter Changxin and I joined them on a Yangtze River cruise. These were all very memorable trips. Excuse me. In 1982, Dor had Douglas, her son, take Mother Goose rhymes and other children's books for me to read to my 2-year-old granddaughter, Jing Jing. To this day, Jing still remembers some of the nursery rhymes that I taught her from those books, and she teaches them to her children now. In 1984, Dor and Tom helped our daughter Marcia learn English and learn about American culture when she came to the U.S. They did the same for our youngest daughter Changda when she came to the States the following year. In fact, Changda stayed with Dor and Tom for a whole year attending ESL, or English language classes. Sometimes Dor would take Changda to her elementary school where she was a teacher. Changda was able to observe and learn how classes in America were conducted. Excuse me. In the past, I had always dreamed of visiting Hawaii. Dor made my dream come true when she invited me to join her on an elder hostel trip to beautiful Maui in 1984. We tasted Hawaiian food, learned Hawaiian dances, sang Hawaiian songs, and made and wore Hawaiian leis. We both came home tanned, refreshed, and greatly enlightened. I'm not sure what she means by that, but sounds good. During one of Dor's visits in Seattle in the 1980s, she and Tom took the trouble to go to the INS, Immigration and Naturalization Services, archives. She was able to obtain copies of historical INS documents of our family. She sent copies to each of us siblings. Thanks to Dor's efforts and thoughtfulness, we now have those valuable documents added to our family history records. Dear Sister Dorothy's long, full, rich, and well-lived life is proof that she had lived up to her Girl Reserves pledge that she made in her teens. And the Girl Reserves were something like the Girl Scouts that she and her sisters were members of, and it was affiliated with the YWCA. And they learned a lot about American culture and values through that program. Her beautiful life brought joy and inspiration to everyone who knew her and loved her. I am proud of her, grateful to her, and I miss her very much. I'm glad that she is now happily united with father and mother and brothers Daniel and Raymond in heaven. And that's the end of her lovely remarks. Thank you.
All right, now we're going to move on with another sister who had something to say. And I believe, well, it's Auntie Helen, but it's going to be Kathy. Oh, yeah, no peripheral vision. Sorry, guys.
Hello, I am Kathy, Helen's daughter. My mother is the youngest child of 6 in the Lu clan group, and she will miss Auntie Dora, her sister, very, very much. I'd like to share the comments that she wrote and shared with Doug recently. As my mother wrote, I always remembered Dorothy being fun-loving and playful. She was a born actress and always remembered her lifting Raymond on her shoulder as an acrobat. He was lighter weight then. She was always adventuresome and traveled in hostels all over the world, and then even stopped to see us in Louisville, Kentucky en route to India. I look forward to seeing you again. Love to you all, Auntie Helen. The Lang family would just like you all to know how much we will miss the beautiful, special light that Auntie Dora showed our entire family in Louisville, Kentucky, and throughout the entire Lang group. Thank you.
Somehow because her last name is Chin, but I just found out that no, it was through my mom that she is one of the dearest family friends. So, Mamie Chin.
Thank you. You know, all the Chins is like the Smiths and the Brown. We're all related. Yeah. You know, Dora and I have been friends for over 80 years. Now that's longer than some people live, right? But anyway, we started our friendship when we were in high school. And as some of the comments have come across, we were girl reserves. And they later became Y teams, but also associated with the YWCA. And I remember that during those days, I guess people were curious about the Chinese because one of the gals in our group, Gladys Chang Chin, her aunt was a prominent member of the YWCA in Seattle. So she used to pick us up occasionally, and we would wear our cheongsam, and she'd take us to a home who was having a party, and we would sing. And we would sing 2 songs in particular, the Purple Bamboo and the Vendor Song. And we made many visits. Nobody ever gave us anything to eat, and we weren't paid. So I don't remember what it was all about. Well, Dora and I went to different schools in the beginning because we lived in different neighborhoods. But our bonding came through the Girl Reserves and the Chinese Baptist Church. Later on, when we went to college, that's when we really got to see each other quite often. As Jean mentioned, we loved movies, and we used to sneak and read those movie magazines. Once in a while, we would cut a class and go to a movie. Remember that, Jean? Because I remember one time she was hesitant, but we coerced you into going. Well, later on, while we were in college, I convinced Dorothy to go be a camp counselor with me, with the YWCA. And as you know, she loved to see new things and to try out new things. So we were counselors in Oregon. And she decided later on that having a whole cabin of teenage girls was not the way to have a good vacation. She only did it once. But I didn't blame her because they were it was rough. But college was fun for us, and later on, when we found out that we loved to travel, the YWCA group, we call ourselves the Girl Reserves. Well, we meet about once or twice, at least every year for many, many years. We would take turns being hostess. We would travel together. And I remember one trip in particular to Butch Suhu's home in Maine, Stonington, Maine. There were about 5 or 6 of us, and we had rented a van and we drove all over the place. I drove around Nova Scotia. We hit Peggy's Cove, we saw the Puffins and the Citadel in Halifax. But the best part of that trip was Butch had a good friend who was a lobster fisherman. And he let us go on board the ship, and we learned how he would set the traps. And then Butch that night would cook the lobsters, and they were not teeny tiny ones. They were 1.5 to 2 pounds, and each of us had one. Remember that, Butch? Well, Butch and Dora and I and Butch's late wife Nancy, we traveled together to Turkey, and we had a wonderful trip, just doing all the different things. And we had another trip that was around the San Juan Islands in Washington. And we did Friday Harbor, Orcas Island, and did a lot. You did that before, Karen?
There for 5 years.
Oh, okay, you know.
Orcas Island.
Yes, yes. Familiar. But anyway, that was a wonderful trip too. But the Girl Reserve group, believe it or not, has been meeting, and we would take turns being hostesses. But I think that the last one that we had together was at Kathy and Doug's home, which was just a year ago. I remember that one in particular because I arrived at the house when Doug and Tom were helping Dora into her wheelchair. And she turned and looked at me and smiled. I knew that she recognized me. And it's a smile I'll never forget. Thank you.